Beyond the Fence Line, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Created by landowners for landowners, we're proud to play a role in conserving the Texas legacy of wide open spaces.
Good afternoon. This is Chad Ellis, the host of Beyond the Fence Line. And I always love our episodes where we have producers come, the ones that actually get their hands, dirty and the true conservationist. And we have, a true conservationist today with us today, Meredith Ellis, a rancher out of North Central Texas, out of Cook County. And I want to thank you again, Meredith, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's good to talk with you.
Your land, like so many other ranches, is home to impressive numbers of diverse wildlife and plant species. And I've often heard you really describe your ranch as this national forest, this preservation. And I really like to just kick off chatting about your property and what it's all home to and what it means to you and your family.
Yeah, definitely. So our ranch spans about 3,000 acres, and it's really at the convergence of two ecoregions. So the High Plains ecoregion and the Cross Timbers ecoregion. So we have like rolling upland hills with just, every native grass you can think of, wide open prairies, think of that in your mind. But then also we have a lot of topography and some bottomland with just some really dense forested land with ancient live oaks. We've got two different creeks running through our ranch that feed to larger waterways, and then just a number of seeps. I've spent about 2 years cataloging all of the biodiversity on the ranch, and my goal was to just catalog like one of every plant that I could possibly find on the ranch, and I'm at over 400 different species. Well over 100 different wildflowers, an federally endangered orchid. We've got monarch butterflies and bald eagles. It's just a breathtaking piece of property, and 200 mother cows along with it. So, we're blessed to be able to preserve it and keep it healthy because of our cattle operation.
It just sounds amazing. And, I've been fortunate and been a pleasure to see your place, and it's absolutely amazing. I think through, I guess, some of, my journey as a, rancher and, as well, and others, Meredith, and kind of think about, a lot of times you kind of go through this journey of, I'm a cattleman, and then you kind of go through this and like, no, I'm a grass farmer, right? Or a grassman, and understand that grass component. And then you kind of go through this other transition of saying, actually, it really is about the soils, and I'm actually a soils manager. And I know you've kind of gone through that and see that. So really what you've described of kind of laying out this visual of your property really boils down to the soil, and I've heard you talk about a number of times, Meredith, you've described your soil as our most undepreciated asset. So why is it so important, and why isn't soil more of a focus?
Yeah, so I've given quite a bit of thought to that, and I want to back up. And I started partnering with the Botanical Research Institute of Texas about 2 years ago to have a scientific approach to documenting different plots around our ranch to understand the effect cattle were having on the ecosystem. And so whether they were benefiting the soil or they were a detriment to the area. And I did that, for about a year, but then understood as of late. I had an NRCS guy come out, and he said, if you're going to do this, you have got to do it based on soil type. So I've learned over the years, or over the months, that we have two major ecoregions, but we really, on our ranch specifically, I'm looking at 7 different environmental habitats directly based on soil type. And so why is that important? Because the soil is what informs your plant community in that specific location. And so without knowing what's going on below the ground, you're really not doing a good job of observing what's occurring above the ground. And I think, like, in general, for people that maybe aren't familiar with ranching and how ruminant animals are tied to the land in a symbiotic way, there's almost a microbiome of the cows mixing with a microbiome in the soil. And so in places that I'm seeing that are grazed by cattle, I'm seeing a much richer, diverse species of plants than I am in the same soil type of locations that are not grazed on our ranch. And so my eye is directly pointed down in the dirt at this point moving forward. And I think, like, the reason there might be a disconnect between the importance of soil to not only our food systems but our environment as a whole is because it's not something that we can relate to very easily. We can't anthropomorphize mycorrhizal fungus very easily.
Right.
So those types of things. And so really, as a rancher, learning those visual cues for me to be able to deduct what's going on below the soil is something that is a great asset for not just me in managing my ranch, but for the ecosystem as a whole that I'm trying to keep as healthy as possible.
Yeah, I think you're just spot on, right? The ecological process is very complex, right? And it's hard to understand that. And I think we lose sight. I think you articulated very well, Meredith, in that when we really look at, especially our plains, central plains, right, of Texas being part of that, those ecological processes really were developed around grazing and fire. And, when we take some of those things out of the components, it's hard for our plant communities and those ecological processes to move forward. And it's, when we kind of really think of it, even a broader piece, right, of sustainability and staying in business, right, from being economical to, like you were talking about, the environmental and conservation, and really what this podcast is about, right, beyond the fence line of all of these benefits that you're providing back to the community and tying back to the community. There's a lot at stake there. And what happens if your land is sold, and what is the impact of that loss?
Oh, I mean, for me, it would be something that I just could never live with. I mean, I really feel like my motivation is coming from a place of wanting to make the world better for my 6-year-old son. And the Texas Observer stated that in Texas alone, there's only 1% of native grassland remaining in the state of Texas. And then nationwide, I think that number is like 4% or something. I mean, it's just really low. And, once you lose that symbiotic relationship of all of these species that are working together to live with each other and working with each other, and you break that cycle, you can't get it back. It's so much easier to protect it and to keep it, than it is to try to recreate that system. And so, for me, my number one goal in my life is to leave this land better off than it was before, and to hold it in perpetuity for the benefit of us all on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressures, and from keeping the land better and just staying in business, right? And do you have any advice for other farmers and ranchers facing these pressures of trying to stay in business, trying to keep their land intact?
Yeah, I do. So that's another thing. I mean, I always come back to my son, but I guess that's just what moms do. But my thinking is that, what can I do to make this ranch profitable and less risky in the future? So it's something that is an appealing line of work for my son to want to, he can have a steady income in order to preserve it. And so those are kind of the things that I think of, because the next generation that really might not be interested in ranching, have a lot of bills to pay, health insurance to pay, when they're looking at selling this land that's appreciating and having a big chunk of money in their pocket, or working in an uncertain, unforgiving ranching industry, it's really a no-brainer. So I've put a lot of thought into what needs to be done to help preserve this land for the future generation to want to have that undertaking. And there's a lot of options. TALT is one of them, but for some things that are in the works are the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, which is a program that's a private agreement between a rancher and a corporation that would like to buy environmental benefits to have on their portfolio. So the main goods that a rancher would be trading would be carbon that's sequestered into the ground, clean water that's sent downstream, and then there's a biodiversity component that's in the works. And so basically, a ranch that is doing a good job maintaining their ecosystem can receive payments from a corporation wanting to support that good work. And so that way a ranch can help lower their risk, help be more profitable moving forward. There's also a group that I'm involved with called the Rural Investment to Protect the Environment. And this group is trying to basically the exact same thing as the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, except it's a public payment. So it's through the government. So I think both, the federal government and these large corporations are realizing that the value that ranch land has is not just pounds of beef. it's clean water downstream, it's carbon that's sequestered in the soil, it's ecosystems that's housing a lot of biodiversity, that those are products that need to be added to a rancher's portfolio that they provide to the world, not just beef. And so in the very near future, there's going to be a public option and a private option to get a little income for the good work that ranchers are doing, or that good work that ranchers would like to adopt in the future. So those are options in the future.
Yeah, I think those are great options, right? I mean, I think free market approaches are the way of the future, and help, as you said, articulated, you know, keeping our operations viable, right? And really where it comes down to, it's really about quantifying those ecosystem values. And I know this is, you know, something that really could help combat this pressure. I know, you know, you and I have talked about this. I know you're part of, you know, multiple research, you know, in this area. Would you like to kind of maybe share with us some of the research and some of those components around the valuing of these ecosystem services that you're a part of?
Yeah, definitely. So for the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, a lot of the research is around the carbon that's sequestered in the ground. So in order to get kind of a ballpark average based on soil types and practices that ranchers are doing, you know, we've got to have some solid data on that we can extrapolate to other soil types and locations in the area. And so we're working on that. So there's a lot of, you know, core samples, soil analyses, those types of things. But then on top of, you know, that on the ground work, there's also a lot of detailed inputs that I've given the ESMC, as far as the amount of gasoline that we use, the practices that we do, the number of head in the pasture, the grass type. You know, I've given them so much information, but the goal around that is to take that data from ranchers like me, and be able to extrapolate that to a larger population of people that would like to apply to the ESMC. And so, you know, we're the guinea pigs, and we're doing the hard work for, you know, when the whole system goes online, it'll be a much smoother process for a rancher to sign up when it's public.
Yeah. Thanks, you know, Meredith, and you know, my hat's off to you in many ways, and I admire you, and I think all producers do, in that your sacrifice, right? I mean, you sacrifice time away from your operation, time away from little GC, your son, and family, and that balance of you going the extra steps of not just helping, you know, your own operation, but helping all of us. And you know, I think some of that comes beyond of, I mean, you just tell a great story. And I know you spend a lot of time in that sacrifice of having that opportunity to go tell that story of, you know, you and I've gone to DC, and I know you travel and give talks and those things. And, you know, there's a lot of other farmers and ranchers all over who want to tell the story and want to tell it as well as you do. But do you feel like ranchers are really heard? And, you know, I guess another kind of second part to the question is, you know, what kind of noise is drowning out their story?
Well, you know, I don't feel like ranchers are being heard in general. You know, when my dad, you know, first bought this ranch in the early 80s, he didn't say, oh, this 1,000 acres of forest land is sequestering so much carbon, and I bet we have a lot of endangered species on here. You know, that wasn't on his radar.
Right.
And my suspicion is that there are a number of ranchers out there that have no idea the incredible value that they're providing the world. They're just ranching, you know. And I guess the reason why I feel like I want to be vocal is because I see so much opportunity and possibility right now. I feel like we can be a big solution to the climate issues of our time. Um, and I feel like it's not this big leap, you know. It's cross fencing, it's rotational grazing, it's baby steps. It's not these, big endeavors. And a lot of it is awareness, being aware of what you're doing. A lot of people are doing a great work because, the health of a rancher's the health and success of a ranching operation, their bottom line is directly tied to the health of their land. And so if you're a good rancher and you're doing a good job, chances are you're doing a good job for the environment. And maybe there's things here and there that you can change that would make a huge difference. But overall, there's just so much potential that I see in this land that's this private land that's held by families like mine. And I just I think a lot of it is just that awareness. I think about that all the time of like, if there's a rancher that has no idea that flower that he's looking at is the only one in their county, those those types of things. So and I do feel that we need to be more aggressive. We need to be louder. The last 1% of grasslands remaining in Texas and 4% of grasslands in the nation. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time to put this off. We need to let all ranchers know that their main product is no longer beef. It's that ecosystem that they've been taking care of for generations.
So how can other ranchers really be part of this conversation, right? It's going to take us all to be part of it. There's just, right, when you look at the population, as you said, there's really only 0.5% of us actually on the land and taking care of it from that perspective when we look at it from a population. So how can we be part of it?
Well, I think, the first step would be gaining knowledge around the benefits that you are providing, from an environmental standpoint. So, ranch land is going to vary by region. So let's say you had a ranch in New Mexico. Well, maybe your greatest skill is not going to be carbon sequestration, but I bet you've got a number of endangered species that are really pretty thankful that your ranch exists. So really taking the time to learn about the benefits that your land that you're holding is providing would be step one. And the next step, I would say, is to share it somehow. So, make your family ranch a little Facebook page and just, inform others. Those are baby steps, and but they have a huge impact because there is a real disconnect between people in an urban environment that just have no idea the process of what it took to get that steak on their table.
Yeah, I think that's great. You've done a great job from, your websites and Facebook pages and videos and, really telling the story and getting it out there. Kind of what about the, I would say maybe build upon what you talked about is kind of the flip side, right? It's what about the public? What about the individuals that really believe in what you're doing, Meredith, and want to support farmers and ranchers? what can they do to support agriculture with its conservation benefits?
Yeah, I would, demand drives all markets. So I think one thing a consumer could do is buy local, know where your food comes from and how it's produced. Um, you know, uh, uh, and then from a supply chain standpoint, I would, demand traceability. Um, like when you get a box of strawberries at the store and there's a barcode and you can scan it, you can see the person that picked those strawberries. That type of thing doesn't exist in the beef realm. And because it doesn't exist, there's no differentiating my steak from maybe someone's steak that, might not have the same sentiments about the environment. So, traceability and buying local, knowing the ranch that you're buying your beef from, supporting those ranches that are benefiting the environment and doing it right. That creating that type of demand will create a change in the supply chain moving forward.
Yeah, great. Well, Meredith, do you have any other closing comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us?
I just appreciate that that the knowledge that there's a lot of options in the future of my land. I see a number of different ships that are sailing out there and sailing back to us, that are going to be good for the ranching industry. So I just have all the hope in the world for our industry going forward in the future. And, I just encourage everyone to just really be aware of the services that they're providing. And I'm not talking about beef.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thank you, Meredith, one, for, joining us today and just providing insight and conversation. But more importantly, I just want to thank you, for helping our industry and helping move, everything forward, and your sacrifices and everything. It's just amazing to me, and I truly appreciate it and admire, you and your family for that sacrifice. It truly does mean a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to other ranchers as well. All I would ask is you just keep telling the story often and well, and which you do. And I think all of us need to join you and be by your side to keep telling the story. And thanks again, Meredith.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Chad, for all you've done for our ranch and so many other ranches, to help us be on a good path forward. So back
Yeah.
at
Well, I appreciate that. And, I think that's what we're all here for, and that's what this podcast is about, right? It's beyond the fence line, and, which is, to me, you articulated what the podcast is about. It's about you taking care of the land and that private land stewardship, public benefit of providing all of those public services to the full community and to all Texans. And so again, appreciate it, and hope everybody can join us on our next podcast. So thanks again. Have a blessed one.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Beyond the Fence Line is brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust, dedicated to conserving the Texas heritage of agricultural lands, wildlife habitats, and natural resources. Find out more at txaglandtrust.org.